I'm back, and it's been a long time since I made a YouTube video. I've been going through a lot in my life. I've been going through a lot of ups. I've been going through a lot of downs. Most notably, what this video is about is I've started an Etsy plant shop. I've finally found a way to kind of spread my planty seed all over, well, as many places as will have me, and I thought it was the perfect time to jump back into my YouTube channel. Now that to be honest with you, now that I finally feel like I have something interesting to talk about, I'm going to tell you the story of how I started my Etsy plant shop. And to do that, I'm just thinking of how long we're going to have to start back. I think it goes back maybe 6 months. I don't know, 3-6 months of my life, a year of my life, who knows? We're going to step back and we're going to try and figure this out together anyways. So maybe let's actually start way far back. Maybe let's start right from the very beginning. There was a time where I was talking to a camera just like this, and I was creating a video game. It was called Gooberries, and it was a PC game. It's actually still available on Steam, and it was a game about farming. Well, it was initially a game about farming, and then it turned into a game about these like floating terrariums where you would have these different little pods, and you were this little robot, and you would pop into these different pods, and you could set different seasons, and each season would have different temperatures and different plants that you could grow. And making that video game took me 3 years of my life. When I finally sold the video game, I think I ended up making like $300 or something like that off of it. Truly looking back at that time in my life, even though it took me 3 years to make that video game, the most important part of that whole experience was a few things. Number one, learning to make video games and learning to program video games and just learning the ins and outs of how computers work and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not going to get too crazy on you, but it sort of just like warped my perception on what life is, on what reality is. You know, if I can create a video game, and if I can create little characters that will live out their lives and things like that, it just kind of lets you take a step back and look at, well, what if maybe someone's doing that to me, or what if maybe I'm actually doing, I'm not going to, but the ultimate lessons that I actually learned from creating that video game was, number one, that I can actually dedicate myself to a project for 3+ years and, you know, see it all the way through. But the second thing that video game taught me is that I just love ecosystems. I love plants. I love nature. I love life. I love seeing how it all is just kind of flowing and working together. And I was inadvertently creating, you know, my passion, but in some digital form. I was trying to create what I really loved in some digital form, but I couldn't see. I had blinders on, and I couldn't see that what I really loved was already all around me. And that'll take me back to the beginning of this YouTube channel, the videos that are actually still on there, the videos that you can actually go watch, where I started to get obsessed with nature and hiking, and just, I don't know, there's just something about it. I still to this day just love kind of being wrapped up in nature. I love being surrounded by plants. You can see I'm sort of at the point in my life where just this culmination of all the skills that I've been accruing over my years, it's all sort of starting to come together, and it's all sort of starting to evolve and work together. Let me jump back into the YouTube channel, because believe it or not, this YouTube channel, it's influenced all of this stuff, really. So I was making the nature videos, I was hiking around, I was climbing mountains, I was doing all of that sort of stuff. I started to realize that was becoming kind of, I mean, it wasn't really feasible. Although I love to explore, and I love to see things, and I love to be in nature, I'm not really the type of person that wants to travel all over the world. I don't want to be taking flights all over the place. I don't want to be traveling everywhere all the time. And I was getting sick of driving, you know, 4+ hours to the mountains to hike a trail, and then drive 4 hours back, and then do that again a few days later. And I wanted to start to find a way of, you know, sharing what I love to do, but in more of a way where I could do more of it, because I was surrounded by it, and I was you know, I could essentially become more passionate about it because I was surrounded by it. That led me to doing some DIY projects. If you look back on my YouTube channel, I made an A-frame cabin. I did a whole bunch of like outdoor gardening. I assembled a greenhouse that I bought on Amazon or something like that. And I had all these plans of doing all this outdoor stuff. And then, believe it or not, houseplants hadn't even caught my eye at that point. But somewhere in that moment, probably searching a greenhouse, probably looking for some outdoor plants or something like that, probably when the weather started going from summer to fall, and I was realizing that, you know, if I wanted to continue loving plants, I was going to have to bring them indoors. One thing led to another, and houseplants caught my eye, and I fell in love. I fell in love for about a year. I started collecting every sort of houseplant I could find. You can see just a tiny bit of what's going on behind me. I grew in love with growing plants in pots, and I grew in love with searching Facebook Marketplace for pots, and I grew in love with meeting people. I met a bonsai president. It was a really fun time in my life where I was just kind of searching for, you know, mostly like pots and stuff to put plants in most of the time, but also like new plants. And I was finding all the local greenhouses in my area, and I was discovering things, and I was talking to people, and I don't know, I just kind of felt like I was really exploring my area, and I was finding what was near me. And then for a long time, I was searching for like an actual like brick and mortar retail store. I found this store. I saw something online. I read an article or something. I don't know how it popped into my life. It just sort of, this random store that's about 45-minute drive from me popped into my internet bubble. And to be honest with you, I didn't even realize at this point that plant stores existed, but this one was made out of a shipping container, and it was just this really awesome looking, like lush, full of tropical plants place. I started visiting houseplant stores in my local area. I started sort of seeing that, hey, there's a whole world of this stuff going on. And of course, in the midst of all that, I've always been sort of like an online type person anyways. I discovered that there's an enormous world of plants and stuff on Etsy. Actually, I'm jumping ahead with all of that. Let me step back. So for the longest time, I tried to find a retail store. I got close a few times. I got so close a few times. I had a few weeks of a conversation with this one person that I thought for sure I was going to be able to rent. It was like an old produce stand, and it had like 5 acres attached to it, and it had this old like shed, and it was like all set up to be what I thought was going to be like a perfect thing. Now looking back at it, I'm glad that it actually didn't work out. But I had you know, many weeks of conversations with something like that. I had another few months of a conversation with someone in my local town who was renting a space, you know, just in the kind of downtown part area of my town. It was an old bakery, and I thought it had all this old equipment in it, and I thought it was going to be really cool. I was going to turn it into this sort of like, you know, cyberpunk sort of industrial looking plant store. Again, sort of looking back on that, I'm not sure if I actually could have handled it at the time, but that didn't end up working out. The person that was in charge of that ended up renting out the space to someone else who was going to do antiques or something like that. I talked to a bunch of other stores in my local town about, you know, just using some of their space. I actually put plants in a few of the stores in my local town. At first in hopes of sort of selling them. I created this whole tag system where people could scan it with their phone, and they could like buy the plant and just kind of walk out with it. I had a conversation with one of the store owners that I had plants in at one point. It was a CBD store that sold CBD products and things like that. And we were talking about how you know, when people come to their store, they're coming to buy a specific thing. They're coming to buy their product. And it just sort of opened my eyes that that's true, that you can't necessarily I guess I just sort of realized that it wasn't going to work, just kind of like randomly trying to get little corners of spaces in stores to put my little plants, and where I had no control over the temperatures, and I had no control over anything. But long story short, I decided that I didn't want to do a retail location. I decided that I had all these skills that I'd built up you know, since I was a kid, really. There was almost a moment in my life where I realized it, that I've got to take advantage of that. I've got to take advantage of all these skills that I've already created. And I've always sort of had this, I've always sort of had this dream of becoming like, not necessarily a digital nomad that can just travel all over the place and, roam the country and do things, but just someone that's kind of, figured out how to do, something like what's going on behind me here. Yeah, I want to be part of that life. There's a feeling that I'm sure a lot of you can relate with, of where you're sort of in between things. You feel lost. You feel like you don't really know exactly what you sort of know what you want to do, but at the same time, it doesn't really make sense of how you could possibly do what you want to do, and everything seems so kind of distant and vague, and you just seem to not really know of anything. You seem to be just wandering, and truthfully, it's because at that moment in time you are. Ugh, it feels like walking around in sludge sometimes. I think a good way to describe it is sort of like a cocoon phase, where you're imagine being in a cave and the walls are kind of just closing in on you, but eventually those walls are gonna start spreading apart, and you're gonna see a light start to appear on the other end, and you're gonna start running towards that light. And I feel like that's sort of what happened with me. Eventually, I got the idea. I was trying to think this morning of where I even got the idea. And you know what it was? I was watching a YouTube video. I don't even remember the name of the channel anymore. It was something similar to the name of my Etsy shop, which is Tiny World Terraria. If you haven't seen it, Tiny World Terraria. If you want to go over there and follow my shop and help more people to see it, I guess I might as well. I think that's the first time I've actually mentioned the name of the shop in this video. It was some YouTube channel, and anyways, it was this guy who was growing plants in tubs, just like what you see right behind me. And it was the most I know it's not that crazy of a concept, but to me, it was like my world came crashing in all at once. And I'd realized that this is what I loved. I've always loved terrariums. I've always loved aquariums. I've always loved doing things. This was a way. I've always loved these tiny little ecosystems. I've always loved having these miniature little worlds of life. I don't know, and to be honest with you, just sort of like playing God, kind of lording over these little, isn't that what's cool about having an aquarium, is that you're kind of the observer on the outside of it? But again, I'm not going to get into all of that. It dawned on me that this was a way for me to have, almost an unlimited amount of miniature little ecosystems, miniature little bubbles. Hold on. Whew. I'm on a real rant here, and I need to take a water break because my throat's feeling a little raw. Should I take my hat off for the last of them, for the last of the videos? Yeah, let's take it off. Ooh, I can hear a lot better. Maybe that'll make the last part of the video even more exciting. So, anyways, I discovered that I could have everything. Oh, internal temp high. A lot. Sorry about that brief intermission there. The camera told me it had been working too hard because I'd taken too many takes in the beginning. I took too long to get going and it overheated. But I'm back now. I saw that YouTube channel. I saw this dude that was growing these jungle plants and had all these rare plants and all these things. And I think it had to have been an entire week watching all of his past videos and things like that, and just becoming fascinated. I even reached out to this guy, and I didn't beg him, but I asked him to be my partner and to start an Etsy shop with me. That I wanted to take his, I know it wasn't his concept, the tubs and stuff like that, but I wanted to create systems like that, and I wanted to spread the love of plants all over the world. He declined. He did at least write back, which was nice. Most people that I reach out to online, they just completely ignore whatever I say because it's usually some outlandish, crazy idea. But he did reply, and he said that he was flattered that I liked his stuff and all that sort of thing. And but he was more of a collector, and he didn't want to get into the business of it and all that sort of stuff. And I understood that. I myself am a little bit of I truly am a collector as well, but I find it fascinating. I want to be part of the business of it for the simple fact that I can help give people plants. Did I leave the part in the video where I said I was taking my hat down, my hood? I hope I did. I hope I made that transition properly. But nonetheless, I had the vision and I was moving forward. I actually reached out to another person on Etsy. I spent a lot of time just looking at other plant stores and what they were doing and trying to gather just, I don't know, information about how it all worked and what people were selling and what was available and what wasn't and how people talked about their plants and all of that sort of stuff. So I spent a long time just researching that sort of thing. And I reached out to a person, I think I reached out to a couple people, one of which responded back to me. And this cool guy named Hugh, I asked, again, sort of a similar question of, do you want to be my partner? See, at the time I was kind of thinking that, I don't know, I thought maybe if I had a partner or something, maybe if I was working with someone, I would be able to get off the ground a little bit quicker. I'd be able to move a little bit faster. I wouldn't have to learn as many things and stuff like that. So I reached out to another person on Etsy, another shop owner that already had, it was a star seller and all that sort of stuff. And kind of, inquired about a partnership, and it sort of looked a little bit positive for a second. And ultimately, it just didn't really work out. And I kind of felt what I knew all along was that I just had to sort of, take the step myself. And it was that moment, it was the moment when I realized that rather than sort of, sending out these emails and just sort of waiting on someone to respond back to me and waiting on something to start moving, that I had to just do something myself. And I just had to pull the trigger, and I made the investment. I bought all of the racks that you're seeing behind me. I've also got some more racks sitting right over there. I'm planning on putting some more racks on that wall over there that you can't see. I bought all the equipment I needed. I bought all those racks. I searched all the Targets in my neighborhood because it's got the specific tubs that I love that have the vacuum seal, even though I don't even use the vacuum seal portion of it. I also bought lights to illuminate all of my different little ecosystems on the shelves back there. And I've actually, since then, only a few months into the project, I've actually replaced all of my grow lights. I've upgraded all of my grow lights. I've been investing everything that I've been earning from the Etsy plant shop back into the plant shop and just making everything better. But the point was back then that I got my first setup, I got everything going, and I dove in, man. It was at least a few $1,000s in the beginning to get all my equipment, to get my initial inventory of all my plants. I dove in, I actually spent the money, I got everything set up, I got everything going, I got the Etsy store rolling, I got my first listings on there. My big thing, my big shtick that I thought would be cool about my little Etsy shop was to do really neat pictures. I noticed that a lot of people do, pictures of plants on white backgrounds, and it's just sort of, I get the idea. They stick it in a photo box, and it's just a nice, bright, good-looking representative of whatever the plant is. But I wanted to do kind of artsy pictures. At some point, maybe I'll make a video on how I actually do those plant pictures. But nonetheless, I found my little shtick. I found my way that I was going to sort of set myself apart. And that pretty much leads me to where I am today. But believe it or not, I don't know if it was my different pictures. I don't know if it was just that, it was right for me. I don't know if it just happens for every person that starts an Etsy shop, but it was surprisingly fast at how fast I got my first sale. I think it was about a week after I launched the Etsy store officially. And when I say launched the Etsy store, it basically just means I set up the account and you're pretty much already in. As soon as you start putting listings on there, they'll start putting the listings out there. Some poor unfortunate soul that I don't even remember the name of, they chose to buy a plant from me from an Etsy store that said 0 sales on the thing, and I can't express how grateful I was. I think I wrote them a message and told them how grateful I was. It's getting that first sale. It's getting that first thing that sort of, it gives you that it gives you that kind of A-okay that if someone was willing to buy a plant from you, and I boxed it up and I did the best I could, and I packaged it up and I wrote my little handwritten note in there and said, thank you, you're my first order, and all that, and they got it and they loved it, and I confirmed everything and all that. If that could actually happen once, well, then of course, logically, it could happen over and over and over again. And since then, it's been about a month. I've still less than 100 sales. I'm at like 35 sales or something like that, 35 or 36 sales. It feels consistent. I've been shipping out packages. Everything's starting to snowball and everything's starting to happen. I took a vacation to Florida. I didn't pay attention to the Etsy shop for a while, but all through my vacation, all of my hard work was paying off. All of the listings, all of the taking pictures, all of the trying to be creative and doing all of that stuff. I got an order every single day that I was on vacation. I mean, what a cool way to wake up when you're traveling, right? Every single day you wake up and you see a new order, I was a little nervous because I had to wait until I got back to actually, box them and ship them and everything like that. But nonetheless, I've been getting consistent orders. And since I've come back, I've dove back in. I got a whole new set of plants. The other day I did a plant picture day, and I did my biggest amount of plant pictures in one day. I did 8 different little photo sessions for plants, and I got 8 new listings up on my Etsy shop, Tiny World Terraria. That's pretty much it. Did I say how much my first month was? It's been a really positive number for me. It was I don't remember the exact cents. I'd have to look at it. I posted it on my Instagram at Tiny World Terraria if you want to follow there. But it was like $322 is what I made in April, my first month of having my Etsy shop, Tiny World Terraria. Sorry about that. I had to change the view. My battery on the camera died. I'm using a new camera. I'm using new equipment. And I don't know, man. I don't know if it was just luck or if I'm just kind of fitting into it, but it was amazing. On the first, I said it took like a week to get my first order. I don't remember how long after that, maybe a couple weeks to get like my first, what's called a payout, where they actually pay you how much, and it was like $20 or something silly like that. But then the cool thing is that week after week, it was like $50, and then it was like $80. And I think my top was like $100 and some or whatever. I don't want to sugarcoat the fact that it's not actually, that's all that money, that $322 I made in the first month isn't actually profit, because I probably spent at least half that, probably even more than half that on the actual plants. I'm not taking into account any of my electricity or any of that sort of stuff. I take into account a little bit with my pricing on the Etsy store. Like I take into account the packaging and stuff. It cost me like maybe $3 to package up something and send it. It cost me like $8 to actually ship something most places except for like California in this country. And then of course this past month, as I started getting more and more orders, I started getting more and more excited. So I was buying more and more equipment. I upgraded my lights. I went from like just these like basic little lights that were kind of spanning the shelves back there to now each like bin has its own personal light. And what was I going to talk about next? So that was the story of starting my Etsy shop to the best I can remember. I didn't really plan on going all the way back to the beginning of creating the video game and all of that sort of stuff. But I am kind of happy that it all just sort of spilled out of me, because reflecting back on it, it all was just a huge part of the process. I don't know, it's looking okay. I think it's looking okay for me. So again, one more time, Tiny World Terraria. Tiny World Terraria is the name of my Etsy shop. Go there, follow it, tell Etsy that it's great, so it gives me more traffic and all of that stuff. I'm a little bit scared, to be honest with you. I'm a little scared of really starting to get a lot of orders on my Etsy shop, because I don't know, what's it going to be like? What's it going to be like when, everything behind me, when all these tubs are like emptying out in a month or something like that, and I'm constantly having to replenish things, and that's the brutal truth. What is that going to be like? Is that something that I can even manage, that I can even handle doing? In a weird sense, I'm still sort of trudging around in that muck, in that sludgy sort of lost state. And it's cool. I'm kind of enjoying it.